Okay, all set. So today we're going to do an interview where talk a little bit about the 5 things you learned while being a police officer.
Okay,
And the first one was listen more than you speak.
that's a good one. So no one likes to get stopped by the police, right? And so when you make a traffic stop, oftentimes people are upset and they want to argue with you and tell you that they didn't do things wrong. And what I learned was just to let them talk. There's a verse in James in the Bible that says it's good to listen much, speak little, and not become angry. I typed that out, cut it out, and put it on the inside of my ticket book to remind me to let people have their say. And it works well not only in that situation, but it's worked for me in situations with my subordinates, when I had an issue with them, or when one of my bosses had an issue with me. By letting somebody say what they've got to say and really listening to them, they feel heard. And oftentimes it de-escalates the situation because they're sometimes expecting a fight and they don't get one.
Don't get one.
Yeah.
Okay, good advice. Let people save face. Now, isn't that it's kind of similar?
It is.
Or branches off of
It is. Where that first became important to me was when I was working in the accident investigation squad, and one of the things we did was we investigated hit-skip accidents where people leave the scene. And oftentimes, by the time we call that person into the office to interview them, we've got the license number of their car, description of driver, we kind of know it's them. And of course, they don't want to come in and admit they did something wrong. So we would find ways to let them save face by saying, you know, this is not that unusual, it happens quite a bit. I understand you might have maybe had too much to drink and you were scared, or maybe your license wasn't good, or you're somewhere so you didn't want your wife to know about, and that's okay. All we need to do is clear up this accident. And 90+% of the time they go, yeah, I made a mistake and I did it. But we let them save face.
Okay.
You know, we said, look, you're going to walk away from here with a ticket. We got to do that, but you know, that's kind of going to be the end of it. And by allowing them to save face, they gave us what we needed as well. And again, a lesson you learn all throughout your life.
But then you're letting them talk while you listen.
Absolutely.
At the same time.
Absolutely.
Number 3 is say yes unless you have to say no.
Right. So that's something I picked up as I moved up in the ranks. People would come to me, people that work for me, with ideas and things they wanted to try. What I learned was, unless you really have to say no, give them a chance. Even if it doesn't work, they've learned something from that. But they respect the fact that you value their opinions. And so I've used that a lot throughout my career, but I've also used it with my children and in a number of other social and other relationships. I mean, there are times, of course, where you have to say no. The risk is too high, right?
Exactly.
But if you could say yes, I always believe in saying yes, and I try to do that on city council now when people come to us with requests. My philosophy is say yes unless you have to say no, and it works most of the time.
Most of the time. Does that give them a sense of empowerment, I guess, or?
Well, I think it does. Plus, you know, so many times today, everything that you go to do in an organization, you're met with resistance. You know, all you got to do is pick up and call one company's 800 line to find out how difficult it is to get your problem solved. So when they come to you with a problem and you immediately say, yeah, we can take care of that for you, they weren't expecting that.
Or we'll try this.
Right, we'll try to get it done, yeah.
Good. Don't expect everyone to like you.
Well, that's a good lesson for police officers.
I guess.
And parents.
And councilmen.
And councilmen. Is
right.
That you have to do what you think is right, and sometimes people aren't going to like that. You know, certainly as a commander, I had responsibility for, in some cases, hundreds of people, and I had to make decisions that were in the best interest of the city and the department and everybody's safety, and they didn't always like those decisions, and I understood that. I tried to be respectful to them, but I understood that sometimes I have to do what's right, and people aren't going to like it. And as you said, that happens in city council. Certainly happened a lot with my parents or with my children.
Right,
you know?
right.
Lots of times I had to do what they didn't want me to do, or make them do something they didn't want to do.
But they still love you.
They do, and they fought me then, but they appreciate me now. So
right. It's funny how that works.
Yeah.
And number 5 is think ahead and be prepared.
Absolutely. So one of the first areas where I learned that was just taking runs on the street. You know, you got a domestic call. You have to think before you get there, okay, what's the possibility of different things that are going to happen, and what am I going to do when they do, so that you're prepared to take action. Same thing with the traffic stop, same thing with a number of those things. When I became a sergeant, one of my responsibilities was to carry the shotgun on gun runs, where man with a gun type of thing. It's the same thing. You have to stop and think about what are the circumstances and what am I going to do if this happens? What am I going to do if that happens? After that, I started working in the gang unit, doing street level narcotics raids, and then eventually the narcotics bureau where we're doing house entries. It's really important to be prepared for all the contingencies. And one of the things I stressed to my people is before we went out to do something, we were going to check off all those contingencies and make sure we had a plan for them. And by and large, things went pretty well. So that being prepared, you know, and thinking ahead and having a plan is important in every area of life, but certainly